Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to tackle something that I think is on a lot of people's minds. And it can be a pretty intimidating topic. We're going to be diving deep into the world of college financing.
Yeah, college financing can definitely seem overwhelming, especially with all the jargon and paperwork.
Exactly. Whether you're the one staring down those tuition bills, maybe helping a loved one figure it all out, or just curious about how this whole system works, this deep dive is for you.
That's right. And by the end of this, we really hope you'll feel more confident and equipped to make those tough decisions about funding your education or, helping someone you care about fund theirs.
For sure. And I think one of the biggest things we want to do today is kind of dispel some of the myths around college financing.
Yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions out there, right? Like one big one is that you have to be practically broke to qualify for any financial aid.
Right. It's almost like people think, oh, if we make a decent living, there's no way we'll get any help. But is that really true?
Absolutely not. That's one of the first myths we need to bust wide open. Financial aid is for anyone who needs help paying for college, regardless of their income. And, there's a whole range of aid available, not just need-based stuff.
Okay, so before we even get into loans and savings and all of that, let's talk about this financial aid landscape. What are the major types of aid that people should be aware of?
Well, the first stop is always federal financial aid. This is the aid that comes directly from the U.S. government.
Gotcha.
And it can include grants, work-study programs, and a bunch of different loan options.
Okay, so federal financial aid, that's the first thing to look into.
Exactly. And to unlock those federal aid options, you absolutely need to fill out the FS.
The FSS, the free application for federal student aid. Now, I know that can sound intimidating, especially for families who are, already up to their eyeballs in the college application process.
Oh, yeah. It can definitely feel like adding another layer of stress.
But I'm curious, why is it so crucial for literally everyone to fill it out? Even if, they think, oh, we're not going to qualify for need-based aid, so why bother?
Well, the FSA kind of opens doors, even if you don't think you'll need them right away. You see, some federal grants actually aren't based on financial need at all. And then even if you don't qualify for grants, the FAFSA is often, the gateway to federal loans, which tend to have way better terms than private loans.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about need-based aid. It's also about, getting access to the best possible loan options if you end up needing them.
Right. It's like getting pre-approved for the best deals out there. You want to have those options on the table.
Makes sense. So it's not just about need-based aid. It's also about potentially qualifying for federal loans with lower interest rates and those more flexible repayment options.
Exactly. And here's a little pro tip for everyone. Don't wait till the last minute. FSA deadlines can vary depending on the state and the school you're applying to. And sometimes some of the aid is awarded on a first-come, first-served basis.
Oh, so you could potentially miss out if you drag your feet.
Yeah, exactly. So get that FSA in early.
So we've got the AFSA on our to-do list. But before we, dive deeper into the whole loan situation, what else should people be exploring in this financial aid landscape?
Well, beyond federal aid, there's also state and institutional aid. Think of it as like a second layer of potential support.
Okay, tell us about these.
So a lot of states actually have their own financial aid programs, which might include grants and scholarships. These can be based on all kinds of things like where you live, your academic achievements, or even the specific field you're planning to study.
So it really is worth researching what your state has to offer because it sounds like it can be pretty different from state to state.
Absolutely. And don't forget about institutional aid. Many colleges and universities have their own scholarships, grants, and even sometimes tuition discounts that they offer.
Oh, I can just...
Sometimes those are automatic,
Yeah.
Based on your application. But sometimes you have to apply for them separately. So, yeah, it's worth checking those out.
It's like a whole secret menu of financial aid options.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of tucked away on all those college websites. So while you're on there, don't just focus on the sticker price of tuition. Actually dig deeper into their financial aid sections. You might be really surprised at what you find.
Okay, so we've got federal aid via the AFSS. Then we've got state and institutional aid, which often requires some, detective work to uncover all the possibilities. But before we move on, I'm curious, what about those sticker prices that we see on college websites? How can people get a more realistic sense of what college will actually cost?
Well, that's where this really cool tool comes in. It's called the net price calculator.
Okay.
And a lot of colleges now have these on their websites. So basically what you do is you plug in your family's financial information, and it gives you a personalized estimate of what you might actually end up paying after financial aid is factored in.
So it's kind of like a reality check.
Yeah, exactly. It's more tailored to your specific situation than just looking at the published tuition and fees.
Interesting. But, you know, how accurate are these things, really?
Well, it's still an estimate, of course, but it definitely gives you a more personalized picture than just staring at those initial sticker prices and freaking out.
It's like a little financial crystal ball?
Yeah, you could say that. It helps you see beyond those initial sticker shock moments.
Right, because that sticker price, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It usually only includes tuition and fees. It doesn't really account for all those other essential expenses.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole lot more lurking beneath the surface.
Okay, so this is where I want to get into the nitty-gritty. What are some of those often overlooked expenses that can really add up when it comes to, like, the true cost of college?
Well, think of it this way. That tuition, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Below the surface, you've got expenses like room and board. And those costs can vary a lot depending on whether you live in a dorm or, decide to live off campus.
Right, and then, of course, there are books and supplies, which, especially for certain majors, can be a pretty significant expense.
Absolutely. Textbooks, especially those specialized ones, can really add up.
For sure. And then what about transportation? Gas, car maintenance, public transportation fares, like especially if the college isn't in a very walkable city.
Yeah, those costs are easy to overlook when you're first budgeting.
Definitely. And then there are those everyday personal expenses like clothing, toiletries, entertainment that can all add up pretty quickly too.
Oh, yeah. It's all those little things that you don't necessarily think about right away, but they can really make a dent in your budget if you're not careful.
For sure. It's easy to overlook those everyday costs, but those can really add up.
And one more thing that often gets overlooked is health insurance. A lot of colleges actually require students to have health insurance. So if you're not already covered under a family plan or something, that can be an additional expense.
Wow, it really is like an iceberg, so many hidden costs lurking beneath that initial, the tuition price tag.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to approach this whole cost estimation process?
I would say use those net price calculators as a starting point. Really factor in all those additional expenses we've been talking about, and don't be afraid to reach out to the financial aid office at the colleges you're interested in.
Okay,
They can often provide more personalized guidance and help you understand the full cost picture a little bit better.
Okay, so we've got a hopefully more realistic cost estimate in hand now. Now let's talk about those magical free money options.
Scholarships.
Yes, scholarships. These are definitely the golden tickets when it comes to college financing. It's money that you don't have to repay. And, there are way more scholarships out there than you might think. I love that. They're like little treasure chests just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah.
But how can people find scholarships that actually, like, match their unique situations?
Well, you'd be surprised. There are scholarships for almost everything imaginable. It's not just about academic achievements,
Right.
There are scholarships for like athletic skills, artistic talents, community involvement, even unique hobbies or interests. It's all about finding those kind of like niche opportunities that really align with your strengths or passions.
So it's about thinking beyond those traditional academic scholarships and really, like, exploring the full spectrum of possibilities.
Exactly. And there are tons of resources out there to help you do that. There are online databases where you can search for scholarships based on all kinds of criteria. Your high school guidance counselor can be a really valuable resource too, or the financial aid offices at the colleges you're applying to.
Right.
They often have lists of scholarships that are specific to their institution or region.
It's like having a personal shopper for free money.
Right. They can help you find those hidden gems.
But I'm curious, what if someone, doesn't fit those like traditional scholarship molds? What advice would you give them?
I would say don't give up. Keep digging. There are scholarships out there for first-generation college students, students from specific ethnic backgrounds, students pursuing, certain majors, students who've overcome challenges. I mean, honestly, the possibilities are really vast.
So it's about being persistent and being creative and not letting, like, those initial search results discourage you.
Absolutely. And remember, a lot of times those smaller local scholarships actually have less competition, so your chances of winning might be even higher.
Okay, so we've got our FAFSA submitted, we're
Mhm.
digging deep into state and institutional aid, and we're on the hunt for those scholarship gems. But what happens if those options don't quite cover the cost?
Well, that's when student loans start to come into the picture. But before we venture into that territory, let's talk about one more really proactive strategy for reducing the need for loans in the first place. And that is saving for college ahead of time.
Now that sounds like a smart move. But I know that saving for college, it can seem pretty daunting, especially when those tuition bills seem so far off in the future.
Yeah.
What are some effective strategies for building up those college savings?
It's never too early to start saving, even if it's, just a small amount each month. And there are some really great tools out there that can help you grow those savings tax-free.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the most popular options is a 529 plan.
Ah, 529 plans. Those always sound a little complex to me. Can you break those down a bit?
Sure, think of a 529 plan as like a special savings account, but it's specifically designed for education expenses.
Okay, so it's not just any old savings account.
Right. And the beauty of it is that the money you contribute, it grows tax-free. And then when you use that money for those qualified education expenses like tuition, room and board, those withdrawals are also tax-free, at least at the federal level.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So like a double bonus. You save on taxes while the money's growing, and then you save again when you actually use it for college.
Exactly. It's a really smart way to maximize your savings. And there are actually two main types of 529 plans: savings plans and prepaid tuition plans.
Okay, so two different flavors. What's the difference?
Well, savings plans, those work kind of like a regular investment account. You get to choose from various mutual funds or other investment options.
So with the savings plan, you have the potential for higher returns, but there's also, a bit more risk involved.
Yeah, that's right. The market can go up and down, so there are no guarantees. But if you start early enough and choose investments that align with, your risk tolerance and how long you have until you need the money, those savings can really have the potential to grow significantly.
Makes sense. So higher potential for growth, but also a bit more of a gamble. What about those prepaid tuition plans? How do those work?
Well, those offer a totally different approach. Prepaid tuition plans actually allow you to lock in today's tuition rates at participating colleges and universities. So it's kind of like you're prepaying for future tuition, but at a discount.
Wow, that's a really interesting concept. It's like, buying college tuition on sale, knowing that you're getting the best possible price, even if college is, still years away.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great way to protect yourself from those dreaded tuition increases that we all know are probably coming.
Yeah, for sure. College costs just seem to keep going up and up. So locking in those rates could potentially save you a ton of money in the long run.
Absolutely. But, it's important to remember that prepaid plans typically only cover tuition and those mandatory fees. They don't usually cover other expenses like room and board or books.
Okay, so it's a really strategic move for like locking in that big ticket item, which is the tuition, but you still have to factor in those other costs. Are there any other college savings options that people should know about?
Yeah, there are a couple others. You've got Coverdell Education Savings Accounts, or ESAs for short.
ESAs.
Those are similar to 529 plans in that, the earnings grow tax-free and the withdrawals are tax-free for those qualified education expenses, but they have lower contribution limits than 529 plans.
So lower contribution limits, but still with some nice tax benefits.
Exactly.
Now, what about those custodial accounts I've heard about, the UGMA and UTMA accounts? I've always been a little fuzzy on those.
Yeah, those are accounts that are set up by a parent or guardian for a minor. And the funds, they legally become the child's property once they reach the age of majority. That's typically 18 or 21, depending on the state.
Okay.
And they do offer more flexibility in how the money can be used. It doesn't have to be just for college. But the downside is they don't have those same tax advantages as 529 plans or ESAs.
Got it. So it's like a trade-off, right? More flexibility with how the money can be used, but potentially, less tax efficiency. So it sounds like overall, 529 plans are kind of like the superstars when it comes to saving for college.
Yeah, I'd say they're definitely a powerful tool in your college savings toolkit. But, the best saving strategy ultimately depends on each individual's circumstances and goals.
Makes sense. So we've explored financial aid, we're on the scholarship hunt, and we're hopefully starting to build up those college savings. But what happens if all those options still don't fully cover the cost?
Well, that's when we have to start talking about student loans. And it's important to remember that loans, They're not inherently bad. They can be a really valuable tool for investing in your education. But the key is to borrow responsibly and to understand the different types of loans that are out there.
Yeah, this is where I know a lot of people, start to get a little bit nervous. Loans can feel like this really heavy weight even before you graduate and have to start repaying them. Can you walk us through those different loan options and help us understand which ones might be the best fit for different situations?
Absolutely. So the first distinction we need to make is between federal loans and private loans.
Okay, federal versus private.
Right. So federal loans, those are funded by the U.S. government, and they tend to have lower interest rates and more flexible repayment options. They're usually, the preferred option, especially for undergraduate students.
So federal loans, the safer, more borrower-friendly path.
Yeah.
What are the different types of federal loans out there?
Well, within that federal loan family, you'll encounter a few different types. You've got subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, and then PLUS loans.
Okay, let's break those down. What makes a subsidized loan so special?
Okay, so direct subsidized loans, these are need-based, meaning you have to demonstrate financial need to qualify. And the great thing about subsidized loans is that the government actually pays the interest on those loans while you're still in school. And they also cover the interest during your grace period after you graduate. And even during deferment periods if you need to, postpone your payments for any reason.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's like a built-in interest-free period. That sounds like a pretty sweet deal.
It is. It gives borrowers a chance to, kind of get on their feet financially after graduation before those interest payments start hitting their bank account.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So subsidized loans, interest-free, while you're in school, during that grace period, and even during deferment. What about those unsubsidized loans?
Okay, so direct unsubsidized loans, those are available to all undergraduate students regardless of their financial need. However, the interest on these loans starts accruing right away, even while you're still in school.
So even though you're not making payments yet, that interest is building up in the background.
That's exactly right. So, it's important to keep that accruing interest in mind when you're calculating how much to borrow because it will eventually be added to your principal balance, which can make the loan larger over time.
Okay, so subsidized loans, interest-free for a while. Unsubsidized loans, interest starts accruing immediately. What about those PLUS loans? Those sound a little different.
Yeah, so direct PLOS loans, those are specifically for parents of dependent undergraduate students or for graduate students directly. They have their own separate terms and usually carry a slightly higher interest rate than subsidized or unsubsidized loans.
So the PLUS loans are kind of like the parent rescue option or a way for grad students to get some extra funding if they need it.
Yeah, you could think of it that way, but no matter what type of loan you're considering, whether it's subsidized, unsubsidized, or PLOS, it's really important to borrow only what you truly need and to have a solid plan for how you're going to repay that loan.
That makes a lot of sense. Loans can be a helpful tool, but like with any tool, you got to use it responsibly. What about private loans? When do those come into play?
Well, private loans are offered by banks, credit unions, or other private lenders, and generally they have higher interest rates and less flexible repayment terms than those nice federal loans. So they're not usually the first choice.
So if federal loans are the preferred path, why would someone ever choose a private loan?
Well, it might be because someone needs additional funding beyond what the federal loan limits allow, or maybe they've exhausted their federal loan options, or they don't qualify for certain types of federal loans.
Okay, so private loans not the ideal option,
No.
but sometimes they're necessary. What are the most important things people should be aware of when they're, considering private loans?
Okay, so first, shop around. Interest rates and terms can vary a lot between different lenders, so do your research. Second, pay really close attention to the fine print. Look for any fees, prepayment penalties, and what their deferment or forbearance options are. And third, make sure you have a very solid plan for how you're going to repay that loan, because private loans often have less flexible repayment options than federal loans.
Got it. So it's about doing your due diligence, comparing offers and really making sure you're comfortable with those terms before you sign on that dotted line.
Exactly. And whether you're looking at federal loans or private loans, always remember this. Loans are not free money. They have to be repaid with interest.
It's a good reality check. It's easy to, get caught up in the excitement of going to college and maybe borrow more than you need or can realistically afford to repay. So how can people make sure they're borrowing responsibly and not setting themselves up for, financial stress down the road?
I think the best way to start is with a realistic budget. Outline all your expected costs, factor in any financial aid or scholarships you're getting, and then calculate the gap that really needs to be filled with loans.
Right. So don't just accept the maximum loan amount that you're offered. Actually, be mindful and strategic about how much you're borrowing.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to explore some of those alternative ways to reduce costs that we talked about earlier, like working part-time or starting out at a community college.
Okay, so we've talked about loans, hopefully with an emphasis on responsible borrowing. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about creating a budget that actually works, especially in the often unpredictable world of college life.
Yeah, budgeting in college is so important, not just for managing your money while you're there, but also for setting yourself up for financial success, after you graduate.
Oh, I wish someone had drilled that into my head when I was in college. I basically had zero budget, which led to some pretty creative meal choices.
Yeah.
Let's just say ramen noodles were my best friend.
Huh. I think we've all been there. But creating a budget, it doesn't have to be like this super complicated thing. Just think of it as a roadmap for your finances. It's going to help you track your spending, avoid overspending, and just make sure you're staying on track to reach those financial goals.
Okay, I like that analogy, a roadmap. So let's map out this budgeting journey. What are the essential landmarks we need to hit along the way?
Well, you're going to run into two main types of expenses: fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs are those predictable expenses that stay pretty much the same each month. Things like tuition, fees, and maybe your rent if you have a fixed rate lease.
Okay, so those are like the big, non-negotiable mountains on our financial terrain.
Exactly. Then you've got variable costs, and these are the expenses that fluctuate each month. So you have a little more control over how much you spend in these categories.
So things like groceries, transportation, entertainment, personal care items.
Yeah.
Those are the areas where we can make adjustments and potentially save some money.
Exactly. And then within your budget, it's always wise to carve out a little space for what we call an emergency fund.
Okay, an emergency fund. Kind of like a first aid kit for your finances.
Exactly. It's there for those unexpected expenses that always seem to pop up in college, whether it's a medical bill, a car repair, or your laptop deciding to, totally crash right before finals week.
Oh yeah, those tech emergencies are the worst.
Right. So having that emergency fund can really help you avoid going into debt or, having to dip into your savings to cover those unforeseen costs.
Makes a ton of sense. Okay, so we've got our fixed costs, we've got our variable costs, and we're setting aside a little bit for that emergency fund. Any tips on actually creating a college budget that's, easy to manage and stick to?
Well, thankfully, we live in a time where there are tons of free online budgeting tools and apps available.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, and these can be super helpful for tracking your spending, setting financial goals, and even categorizing your expenses so you can see exactly where your money is going.
Okay, so technology to the rescue. It doesn't have to be all about complicated spreadsheets and financial wizardry. It's more about finding a system that actually works for you and helps you stay on top of your money.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment a little bit. Try different budgeting methods and see what clicks, whether it's the envelope system, the 50-30-20 method, or one of those fancy budgeting apps. The key is to find something that fits your lifestyle and helps you make those conscious spending choices.
Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about financial aid, scholarships, loans, and budgeting. But before we wrap up our deep dive on college financing, are there any other, less conventional strategies that people should consider? I'm always a fan of those outside-the-box ideas.
Oh, absolutely. And some of these can be real game changers when it comes to reducing costs and even gaining valuable experience along the way.
Yeah, I'm all about those unconventional strategies.
Yeah.
What kind of outside-the-box ideas are we talking about here?
Well, one option is to look into work-study programs. A lot of people don't even realize these exist, but they can be a fantastic way to earn money while you're in school.
Oh, yeah, work study.
Yeah.
I remember seeing those listed on, financial aid forms, but I never really looked into them.
A lot of students don't, but it's a great way to gain valuable work experience, often in a field that's related to your studies, all while getting paid. It's kind of like having a built-in paid internship.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. So it's not just about earning money. It's about getting that real-world experience that can make you, way more marketable after you graduate.
Exactly. And the earnings from those work-study programs, they can go directly towards reducing your tuition bill, or sometimes they even give you, a paycheck to help with living expenses.
Wow, that sounds like a win-win. Practical experience, relevant skills, and a boost to your finances all at the same time. What if, a student can't qualify for work study or maybe they want to explore options beyond the campus?
Well, there's always the good old part-time job. It might not be glamorous or directly related to their field of study, but it can still teach valuable life skills like time management and responsibility. And of course, it helps bring in some extra income.
Right. A part-time job can be a great way to learn how to juggle work and school, which is definitely a skill that'll come in handy after graduation.
Absolutely.
So we've got work study programs and part-time jobs. Are there any other paths people can take that could lead to some serious cost savings?
Yeah, absolutely. One strategy that a lot of people don't think about is starting out at a community college for the first 2 years and then transferring to a 4-year university.
You know what? That's something I kind of wish I had explored. It just wasn't really on my radar back then. What are the biggest advantages of taking that route?
Well, first off, community colleges generally have much lower tuition rates compared to those, big 4-year institutions. And the credits you earn, they usually transfer over pretty seamlessly, so you can complete your bachelor's degree without having to sacrifice the quality of your education or delay your graduation.
So it's kind of like a strategic detour on your educational journey. You save money along the way, but you still reach that final destination of that 4-year degree.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that a lot of community colleges actually have, excellent academic programs. And a lot of times the professors there are, really passionate about teaching because that's their primary focus.
Right. So it's not about settling for less. It's about being smart about your finances and making choices that really align with your goals and your budget. Are there any other creative strategies that we haven't touched on yet?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Another thing to look into is internships and fellowships. Some internships actually offer stipends or even pay an hourly wage, so you can get valuable experience in your field while also earning some money.
Right. And then fellowships, those are often merit-based, right?
Exactly. And they can sometimes provide funding for research projects or even study abroad opportunities.
So it's about viewing college not just as this, academic pursuit, but also as a chance to build your resume, gain experience, and really explore different career paths and potentially, even earn some money or get funding for some amazing experiences along the way.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive and really seeking out those opportunities that can, enhance your education and possibly lessen that financial burden.
Okay, we have covered so much ground today. I feel like we've climbed Mount Everest, but instead of ice and snow, it was financial aid forms and loan applications.
Right. But hopefully we've reached the summit together and, we've equipped ourselves with knowledge and a sense of empowerment to tackle those college costs.
I love that. But, it's not just about reaching the summit. It's about making sure we have the right gear and the right mindset for the journey back down, right?
Absolutely. And, the journey doesn't actually end at graduation.
Mm.
Those loans, they'll still be there waiting for you when you toss that cap in the air.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So let's talk about navigating that post-graduation financial landscape. What are some strategies for tackling loan repayment?
Well, one of the most helpful strategies, especially for those who are just starting their careers and might have, lower incomes, is to look into income-driven repayment plans.
Okay, income-driven repayment plans. Can you explain what those are and how they work?
Sure. So these plans are designed to make your monthly loan payments more manageable by adjusting them based on your income and how big your family is. So typically, you'll pay a percentage of your discretionary income, and then after a certain number of years of, making those qualifying payments, any remaining loan balance might actually be forgiven.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's like there's a safety net built into the system that recognizes that not everyone, graduates with this amazing high-paying job right out of the gate.
Exactly. It gives borrowers a little bit of breathing room during those first few years after graduation so that their loan payments aren't, completely overwhelming.
That's so important. I remember feeling so much pressure to immediately start making these huge loan payments when I graduated, and it was really stressful.
I can imagine. So yeah, these income-driven plans can be a lifesaver.
Now, there are different types of these plans, right?
Yeah, there are a few different options, and they each have their own terms and eligibility requirements. It's important to really do your research and figure out which one might be the best fit for your situation. The Federal Student Aid website is a really good resource for exploring those.
Okay, so it's about having a plan and understanding what your options are.
Yeah.
What about those people who go into public service careers? Are there any programs out there that specifically help them with loan repayment?
Absolutely. There's a program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness, or PSLF. And it's incredible. If you work in a qualifying public service job, things like, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, certain teaching or healthcare roles, you might be eligible to have your remaining federal student loan balance completely forgiven after making 120 qualifying payments.
Wait, so you're telling me that if you dedicate your career to, like, serving the public good, you could potentially have your student loans wiped clean?
That's right. It's a way to reward people for choosing those really important public service careers. But it's important to understand all the eligibility requirements and make sure your loans and your job actually qualify.
Right, so it goes back to that planning and research idea. Know the rules of the game before you start playing. Now, what about refinancing student loans? I've heard that can be a way to, potentially save some money.
Yeah, refinancing can be a good option for some people, but you have to really weigh the pros and cons, especially if you have federal loans.
Okay, what are the main things to consider when it comes to refinancing?
Well, if you have good credit and a stable income, you might be able to refinance your loans, especially private loans, and get a lower interest rate. And that could save you money over the life of the loan. It's kind of like shopping around for a better mortgage rate or, a car loan.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you mentioned federal loans. What's the catch there?
The big thing to remember is that if you refinance your federal loans into a private loan, you lose access to some of those really valuable federal protections. Things like those income-driven repayment plans we talked about, and the potential for loan forgiveness programs like PSLF.
Oh, right. So it's kind of a trade-off. You might get a lower interest rate, but you're giving up some of those safety nets that the federal loans provide. That's a big decision.
Definitely not something to rush into. Really think it through and make sure it aligns with your long-term financial goals and how much risk you're comfortable with.
Well, I feel like we've climbed that mountain, crossed that river, and reached the finish line of our college financing marathon. We've tackled costs, explored financial aid, navigated those tricky loans, packed our savings, mapped out our budget, and even strategized for repayment.
And most importantly, we've hopefully replaced some of that, fear and uncertainty with a sense of knowledge and empowerment.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
But before we go, I want to emphasize one really important thing. This isn't a one-and-done process, right?
Right. College financing is kind of a long game. It's not something you just set and forget. It's important to revisit your financial plan at least once a year, or even more often if, your circumstances change.
So it's kind of like taking your financial plan in for an annual checkup, just like you would with your health, making sure everything's still working the way it should and tweaking things as needed.
Exactly. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and your finances need to be able to adapt.
Makes sense. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. What's one action you can take today to start tackling those college costs? Whether it's creating a budget, researching scholarships, or even just having that really honest conversation about finances with your family, every step you take brings you closer to making those educational dreams a reality.
Absolutely. And just remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are tons of resources and people out there who are ready to help. Don't hesitate to reach out to those financial aid offices, guidance counselors, or even financial advisors to get some more personalized advice.
You're right. There's a whole network of support out there. Well, folks, that's it for this deep dive on college financing. I hope you found it helpful and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you all.
And remember, knowledge is power. So keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those minds engaged. We'll be back next time with another deep dive on a totally new topic. Until then, take care.